And it is on this day, August 13th, 2022, that I finished Cibola? I don't know if that's how you say it. I finished this book, and it's fucking fantastic. We're gonna dive right in. It's 1 a.m. I finished this book like 30 minutes ago, but I couldn't start recording until now, so chaos. And also, don't mind the state of my room. I am literally moving out the morning after tomorrow, so bear with me. But while I was packing, I was listening to this book, both the audiobook and sometimes reading the physical book, and I got through like literally half of the book today because it was so fucking good. It was so good. So good. So, pretty great book. Not spoilers. It's just we're diving right on in. Keeping up the theme of the rest of the series, this book is completely different from the other books, in my opinion. It's unique from the other books, if that makes sense. It's like each book is a whole different kind of story, and it's fascinating how you can just feel how different the books are, even though they kind of are following the same overall plot. It's just the type of story it is feels different each time. I don't know if I'm the only one that feels that way, but I get it with all of these. It feels like some books are more focused on like the politics, and some books are more focused on like the unknown, and some books are more focused on like disaster, and some books are more focused on like military, or everybody thinking they're in the right, etc., etc. It's like each book has like their own like theme idea thing that the plot is feeding into, and this book did the exact same thing. It was so good. You know, at like 15% in the book, it felt like I was already like 60%. And what I mean by that is that so much was happening, and it already felt so deep in the plot that it was hard to believe that it was only 15%. And then little did I know that the middle of the book would hit, and the middle of the book would make me think that I was like back at 15%. The pacing was crazy. Like, you feel like it's like the beginning of the book, you feel like so much has happened, and then so much actually happens that you're like, what? Like, dumbfounded for the rest of the book. So there's that. Also, about 15% of the book is when I came up with the idea that this is like Lord of the Flies in space. Don't take my word for it, because it's been a hot minute since I read Lord of the Flies, and I'm not really good at linking classic works to novels, but that was the vibe I got, especially with a certain character doing certain character things. That's the impression I got, is that like the first part of this book is like Lord of the Flies in space. And it just escalates, and it's absolutely fascinating. It's like, again, this book has like a different vibe for me, a different impression than all the other books had. It feels more like a classic novel to me, in a way, with the way it was done, but it is fantastic. Other comments about this book. The interludes are freaking fantastic, and I love them so much. I'm sure there are some people that don't like the interludes, but I love the interludes, and I very much want to like go through all of them in a row and see like the patterns and parallels, but also throughout the book you can see the callbacks that he has. There were some very subtle, and I mean very subtle, foreshadows in this book too. So very subtle foreshadows that were fantastic. Like, we're talking as subtle as like he sneezed. He didn't know if that was because he was embarrassed or because of allergies. And then, like, it moved on to the next line. And then way later, allergies matter. And back then, you assumed it was because of his embarrassment. So you're just like, oh, it's so well done, 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 so well done. So, foreshadows, interludes, fantastic. The prologue pattern broke. The prologue pattern didn't match the pattern of the previous prologues, really. It's like, it kind of did, but it kind of didn't. So, the prologue, we actually had a character that we knew from before in the prologue. And the prologue wasn't as much like showing you the disaster right off the bat, because it didn't. It just told you, oh no, there's bad news, and then ended the prologue. The epilogue kind of explained the prologue, so it kind of worked out, but the prologue broke the pattern. I'm just saying. But the next prologue is with another new character. So, speaking of new characters, we're keeping that pattern in this book, aside from the prologue and epilogue, where it's the new characters except for Holden. And some interesting new characters. In the past, with the previous reviews, I talked about how for a lot of the characters, it's hard for me to get attached to some. I kind of liked Aversarla, I kind of liked Anna, but like not 100% for either of them. This book had a lot more strong feelings towards characters. Just across the board, like positive feelings and negative feelings and mixed feelings. All were significantly stronger towards all the characters, and the characters that we've known since the first book, I have finally grown attached to on some level. Like they've really grown on me. And this is the first time in this series that I can remember that we really dive beyond the very basic level of learning more about the crew. Like there's a lot of like thrown out comments, and there's a lot of those like, he used to do this was like his past, or like, you know, we learned a significant amount about Holden and like his family and stuff like that, but we didn't see Alex and Amos or Amos. Actually, how the audiobook said it, I think was Amos, which honestly doesn't make sense to my brain because it doesn't look spelled that way. But if it's Amos, it's Amos. I need a guide to tell me how to pronounce all the character names, please and thank you. That character, Mr. Burton, Alex, Mr. Burton, and Naomi, it's like, we see them, but we never really had those in-depth discussions with them. And we knew like some like surface level things, but we never really dove that much deeper. This book, we really did, and it's funny how every time we did it, it was through interactions with another character, and we were seeing how all the crew members affected other people. And I really love that about this book, because this book really emphasizes how small little choices, how small little things that people do, their attitude and their like belief and support of their friends really impacts the people around them, and how they share their story and what they've learned and reflect it towards other people and seeing those other people react to it. Fantastic. So specifically, I wanted to say that chapter 25 was really, really, really good, and that's the only chapter I'm going to call out specifically, because honestly I don't know the chapter numbers for the rest of the scenes that I would love to point out all day long. But yeah, I remember right after chapter 25 being like, that was a fantastic interaction between characters. I freaking loved that interaction, and it got me attached to Alex as a character, and I got attached to pretty much all of the crew now. So yeah, speaking of which, Holden has grown on me. The first book, I didn't really like him, period. I kind of saw him as a flawed person. And, you know, part of the series is, like, talking about his, like, persona and what the society sees in him. And that's kind of what I thought for a while, but now I've started to recognize, like, the difference between Holden as a person and his persona. And he's grown on me a little bit. And he's grown as a person. I think that's part of it, is he's a round character. He is adapting and learning along the way. And you can tell he's becoming more open and genuine to himself. And I'm starting to like the new version of him. So I like a lot of characters. Also Baja, I was so drawn into his story from the very beginning, because I had no idea where we were gonna go with this character, and he had that kind of depth. He had that kind of all the complex layers, and going through his experiences was fascinating in this story. So also Baja was a incredible perspective. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm sorry if I'm not. Incredible perspective. Great characters in this book. We're not going to talk about Elvie until spoilers, but you know, we'll get there. Great characters in this book otherwise though. And Havelock returned. So I know I said that like we didn't re-see any characters. We did re-see a character, but we weren't in his perspective before, so I didn't count it. But Havelock. It actually took like 3 chapters in perspective before I remembered who he was. Whoops. But yeah, great book. And then there's one other thing I wanted to do in non-spoilers. Oh, talk about the authors. They did a great job in this book specifically, and they did in the previous books too, but this book specifically, it was 100% clear how, with their like subtle incorporation of like how society is adapted to the things that we struggle to adapt to now. So what I mean is, this book was great at like subtly bringing up topics of like people of color and queer identities and like individuals with disabilities and all of those kinds of things. It subtly brought up all of those subjects with people naturally, normally, again, subtly, without like exploding it and making a big deal out of it, making it sound like it's just normal and accepted. And they did that like throughout the entire book. Very subtle. Again, it was very subtle, and of course I was noticing it because that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, oh. But if you weren't like me and like looking for that kind of stuff, it's hard to notice. It's so subtle. So I really appreciate that. I really, really, really appreciate that. It's the straightforward things. It's like, my grandfather remarried when he was in his late 70s. His husband and him built a garden, and like it's like that very simple one line, that one word. If you didn't actually pay attention to the one word, you never would have noticed. Or like, my aunt was blind, and this is how society like adapted for her, and like she could still work with her blindness and etc., etc. And society was better than our society currently is at making everything more available for people. Anyway, very subtle, very well done, made me very happy. Just throughout the entire book, with like all kinds of things. So really, like, the main social conflict that remains is, were you born in the belt, and were you born in the inner planets? And do you sound like you're Texan? Pretty much. I'm not surprised that Mars sounds Texan. I cannot be less surprised. But really, that's the big thing. And this is a book that like brings up that topic, and especially with Havelock's perspective, it's that it's fascinating to see how the characters war with themselves on, like, is it really okay to judge people based on where they are born? And some characters obviously know what they think on that matter, and other characters think they know what they think, but then they still let people around them be disrespectful. And being supportive is an active thing. It's you actively going out and trying to fix things. It's not a matter of just sitting there and and not being rude yourself. You have to actually speak up when other people are rude, if that makes sense. So seeing characters like fight through that and like try to figure out how far where they are on that like line of like where their actions and beliefs are, very interesting to see as well. But yeah, I love that about this book. Very subtle. I'm starting to think that Amos is bi. I don't know if he actually is, but he has some comments that just, I don't know if he's being serious or not, pretty much. If he is being serious, go you. I don't know, though. It's just a fantastic book. Especially with how much it escalated. The middle part was my favorite part, but pretty much the entire book was fantastic. So, fantastic. Spoilers! This is your chance to leave while I hold up the book dramatically for no reason. Okay, spoilers. Fuck Mercury. Screw him. And he's literally insane. And I screamed about LV several times. Yeah, okay. That's all I had to say. I'm kidding. Mercury. The entire novel, I was like, the beginning I was like, okay, Mercury's gonna just be like, kind of like a Marcon role. Oh, I was wrong. So it starts off with him you know, seeming to have a role, seeming to be like genuinely taking actions, but you can tell where the point is in which he's actually really thinking about power and the power he has, and he's actually like loves the control he has, and he's trying to like he really enjoys it, and that's what Amos originally points out, is that he's enjoying himself when he murdered people in front of everybody. As soon as Holden arrived too, immediately, just like he's happy to murder people, he's enjoying it, and it's at a point in which, I mean, it escalates and escalates and escalates and escalates. He's purposefully escalating it when it doesn't have to escalate. He's making it worse, and he knows he's making it worse, and it's his hatred. It's his hatred, and also the power he's feeling, and he just really, really, really got really caught up in his position. And I don't really think it had anything to do with RCE. Like, he always quotes RCE. He always says this because of RCE. But I think it's 100% the fact that he was giddy on power, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, wow. If he was killed early on, when Amos wanted to kill him, this would be a completely different story. This would be a completely different story. So many of those escalations would not have happened. Multiple would have, but so many would not have if Murtry wasn't there. But Murtry wasn't killed early on. He was a constant, just random factor. He was a constant factor where every time you saw him, you were just like, something's about to go worse. Something's about to go worse. And he just would not change his ideal. And even towards the end, something I respect about Murtry's character, though, and this comes up at the end, is that he calls Holden on his bluffs. And I really like that, because a lot of characters in fantasy series get away with constantly bluffing. And not all fantasy characters should be able to get away with constantly bluffing. And Holden couldn't have gone away with constant bluffing, because, the one time Holden killed somebody, Naomi kind of got angry at him. Well, one time. I think it's the one time Holden killed somebody. So it's good to see him getting called on his bluff, but at the same time, it just makes Murtry more frustrating. So, that character. On the other hand, we have Elvie, who had a crush, I'm going to put that in quotes, on Holden, and I was screaming several times over that. And, it is, in my opinion, from my perspective, a biased perspective, a cliche, or at least a stereotype, or at least an overdone thing, where it's like, there's a woman crushing on someone, and she can't help herself, and no matter what she does, she still has that crush, and she's gonna, like, be, like, embarrassed and, like, fumble in front of him, and blah, 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 and then, like, try to act on it. It was following that path, and the entire time I was like, no, please, don't. It's cliche, and also it just shouldn't happen. And I get it. I would get it if I knew, because I don't know this. I would get it if that is like a normal, typical thing in society, but part of me doubts that that's a very, very, very common thing. I think we see it in movies and TV more than it actually happens, from my perception. So anyway, the entire route, it was happening, and then there was the chapter where she was, like, literally going to, like, go do it. And then the entire time, I had the song from Hamilton, Say No to This, stuck in my head the entire time that scene is playing out. And then, what's his name? It starts with an F. Fayez? I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that guy saved the day. And what I like, especially when he was first speaking in that scene, was that he was correct. Like, everything he was saying was, like, right and accurate, and he was being very scientific minded, which kept it to the character voices, which I really like. But he basically talked her out of that stereotype and talked her out of that cliche and, like, put logical sense to it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And stuff happened. And in the end, Elvie's like, you're right, I didn't have a crush on Holden. I was like, okay, I like how that flipped. I like how it didn't follow the path that it was alluding to the entire book, and that it actually flipped, and she didn't do it. And she was able to recognize, like, her situation and, like, how it influenced what she was feeling and what she actually wasn't feeling. And, you know, I have a very weird relationship with how I experience attraction because of my flag that isn't up anymore. But I really share a lot of the things that he said in his perspective during that scene, because it's really an understanding that, yes, she was thinking of, like, the persona and not the person. And I could go on a long rant about this, but recently I had a conversation with someone about that kind of topic, about that, like, people dating or thinking they are interested in a person based on the outside they see, the impression they see, and not actually, when they actually don't know a single thing about the person. And that's the thing about Holden, and why he's grown on me as a character, is because we didn't really know much of him as a person until we get all this tidbit through the books. And I think this is the book that officially enough of him came out that I was like, I think I'm starting to understand this person. So, anyway, that whole idea with, like, actually knowing the person being, like, a whole theme and idea that came up in that discussion made me happy. And I actually like how it was resolved, even though I was screaming about the plot along the way. All the interludes are fantastic. Just want to emphasize that. It reaches out, it reaches out, it reaches out, it reaches out. Miller? Okay, I love Investigator Miller too much. It's a problem. It really is a problem. It's a problem. Because I love Investigator Miller. He's, like, now a favorite character. And it's a problem. And the fact that his interactions with Holden have, like, gotten really, really interesting, and, like, especially with, like, their banter and stuff and their interactions, fascinating. And at the end, this is how you know Holden's a round character. At the end, he says, "Goodbye, friend." He calls Miller friend. Okay. Their interactions are fantastic. That's all I have to say. Miller's appearances in this book were fantastic. The interludes where the investigator, not really Miller, but the investigator are having their weird moments. It's fantastic, and I love them so much. Okay, continue. Oh, small comment. I probably should have had this in non-spoilers, but European League football still exists. How many years later? I just love that because that feels very accurate, that European League football would still exist even when we're, like, colonizing the Jovian moons. Yeah, accurate. And I love that people still, like, actively watch the games and are like, why did that team win? I'm excited for the World Cup this fall. I already said Lord of the Flies. We haven't even talked about the thing yet. Disaster. Okay, that is, like, one of the biggest things about this book. It's just utter disaster. And I don't mean it in, like, the disaster that, like, Eros was. No, I mean, like, natural disaster. That was what this book is. Because you see part of the planet explode. And the shockwaves going. And you have 300... Was it 30 kilometer or 300 kilometer? I don't remember. But, like, 30 to 300 kilometer... It's probably 30. If I had to guess. 30 kilometer tsunamis. And, like, hurricane and, like, week-long storms. Multiple week-long storms. I think it was really, really, really freaking long storm. All kinds of stuff happening. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And they run out of supplies. And then they send the supply ships down. And the supply ship blows up. It just gets worse. And it's so freaking good. And that's why I love the middle of this book so freaking much. It's just how it escalates and how it layers. I was already, like, dumbfounded when part of the planet exploded. That was already enough to be like, and then the death slug started, and it just got worse and worse and worse, and then people started going blind. I could not imagine being in a situation where you and the colony are on a planet, in an infinite storm with death slugs that just kill you by touching you, with no help, running out of supplies, and you lose your eyesight. It's a pretty shitty situation. I don't know how these people cope. I really don't. And, you know, they kind of address that too, but that is a situation in which I would especially be so concerned about losing eyesight. Like, in survival situations, when you need to be able to see. That is the whole thing. So intense. It escalated so well. So all of that was great. There's only one predictable thing for me, and the one predictable thing was that it was going to be Holden's medication that helped with the eyesight, because Naomi was like, can you ship down Holden's radiation meds? And I'm like, I bet other people are going to want them. And then, you know, that's what turned up happening. We don't actually know if he got a tumor at the end. I just realized that. But other than that, the beginning of this book with, like, Basha and, like, her, like, in his, like, little meeting group, and him meeting with the family and feeling all the guilt and stuff. And then freaking Mercury coming down and making everything worse. And then Holden showing up and being like, what the fuck? And then, like, trying to communicate. And then Elvie, some of Elvie's, like, data analysis and stuff was fascinating, by the way. Like, her tools and, like, how they looked through things and how she studied. And some of the scientific jargon I actually could vaguely understand. There's plenty of scientific jargon that I had no idea what they were saying. And I would, like, catch some words like, oh, lipids. Okay. It's related to proteins, but, like, I don't know what that means about alien life. But there's a lot of scientific jargon. I'm just curious, like, how much of it was, like, could be, like, an accurate to, like, a foreign ecosystem. So, but some of it I caught on, and it made logical sense, the things that I caught on to. But again, there's a lot of things I did not know. But it's interesting, and you can tell that it's built into her character and her speech and how she thought through things. And every time we're in her perspective, she had a very distinguished voice because of it. So, interesting. Fascinating. Tsunami. Avasharla's still fantastic. She has, like, a one line early on where she has, like, a little tiny short message to Fred for Holden, which you better be telling me that Avasharla and Fred are going to keep conspiring in the future, because I really need that in my life. And she's just hilarious. Like, she could show up just in, like, a little tiny recording for, like, 3 lines and just make my day, because she's just freaking hilarious. So, still love Avasharla. Fuck Marjorie, yeah, I wrote that. Okay. Anything else? Is that it? I said that? Yeah. I really got Lord of the Flies vibe in a way. I'm not going to say that that was the entire book, because it wasn't. But it's part of the impression I get from it. It's like something along those lines. It's not those lines, but along those lines. Particularly in the beginning, where it's like Baja and that group, Coop and all of them, against Mercury and all of them. And it's like society kind of falling apart and being so focused on us versus them that they miss the actual real disaster and the actual real problems, and the fact that they were all gonna die. And the entire time it's like, oh, because we're all gonna die, that means I get to do whatever I want. And I fundamentally did not understand that mentality through the book, but that's part of what makes the, like, experience as a reader that much more of a fun, painful experience. So, tremendous book. Fantastic. It was great. I loved it so much. Favorite so far? Yeah. Favorite so far. Period. Favorite so far. By far. So, great book. I freaking love this book. I love this series. I've really grown attached to this series. And what I'm about to say leads us into what's new and what's next. I love this series so much. But I don't own book 5 because they only had book 6 at Barnes & Noble, and I got book 6 for my birthday, not book 5. And thus, I don't have it with me. And thus, I can't read book 5 yet. And it's a 4 to 6 week wait with the library to get book 5. So I can't continue this series immediately. And therefore, we're going to be reading Warbreaker. Evidently, I packed, so all of my books are packed, so I can't hold them up for you. But I'm reading Warbreaker next. Woohoo! I'll probably start on Sunday when it's not in a box. But I'll start Warbreaker, even though I really want to start the next book of The Expanse, because I really like The Expanse. Because I'm going to read Warbreaker, the standalone. And then after Warbreaker's done, hopefully I would have had enough time to just buy book 5 somewhere. So I could read book 5, and then read book 6, and read book 7, and then 8, and then 9. We might have another standalone somewhere in there, but I am hooked on The Expanse. I am so excited to continue The Expanse. I really want to continue The Expanse. So I'd greatly appreciate if Warbreaker could go quick. I mean, I don't want to speed read Warbreaker. I want to actually take in Warbreaker as a story. But also, right after Warbreaker's over, I want to be able to dive straight into book 5 and then straight into book 6. Hopefully. And yeah, that's the majority of the reading schedule, really. It's just Warbreaker and finish The Expanse. Maybe toss Elantris somewhere in there. It seems like the only Stormlight Archive book in the 4 expensive books is actually the last one. And so I actually have until next November? I think it's November. I have until next November to finish Stormlight Archive. So my timeline is just expanded. Yay. But I do want to be able to read all the books but Stormlight Archive before the beginning of the year. Because the other books are still Cosmere, they're just not Stormlight Archive. So I might as well catch up on Cosmere stuff. Yay. On that note, we get into what's new. We already did the what's next, but what is new? Well, again, I can't show it to you because they're in a box, but I got book 6 of The Expanse. I got Elantris by Brandon Sanderson, and I got Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. And those are my new books that I got for my birthday. So, hurrah. I wish I could show you guys how beautiful. I can load up a photo. We might as well load up a photo. When I got Elantris, I put them all in a line. You can see the organization of my bookshelf changed yet again. I put them all in a line, and I really need to fix the order so you can see the purple, orange, green. But it's very satisfying to see all the UK covers in a row. Very satisfying. It makes me very happy. So, yep. I'm taking all of those with me. Just a quick update on which ones I'm taking with me to college. All of my Brandon Sanderson books are going with me, except for the original Mistborn copies that I have, because they don't match, and I just did my Mistborn reread, so I'm not going to reread it again. I'm taking all of my Expanse books with me, and I think that's it. I think it's just literally The Expanse and my Brandon Sanderson books, and that's all I'm taking with me to college. So, yeah. And my Kindle. I don't know where my Kindle is. I'm pretty sure I packed it. I'll be taking my Kindle too, so if I want to read a standalone via the Kindle, I can also do that as well. Or Discworld. I'm hoping, though, that I can finish the Expanse by the end of the year, because I am hooked for now. I am hooked now, so we're going to be zooming. Anyway, that's all I really had to say. I need to go to bed, but this was fantastic. I'm not going to be able to convey it, but fantastic, especially in the middle of the book. Great. But the way this book escalates, it was just great. It was just great. It was full tilt. I don't know how else to explain it, but fantastic. Period. Okay. So, very excited for book 5. Soon. Warbreaker first, though. I will see you all when I finish Warbreaker. Bye-bye.